So I want to thank you so much, Dr. Ponder, for joining me today. Dr. Ponder is a board-certified pediatric endocrinologist and a professor of medicine at Texas A&M. He has 33 years of professional experience in management of both children and adults with diabetes and 47 years of a personal experience with type 1 diabetes, following his diagnosis at age 9 in Dallas, Texas. He is the co-author of Sugar Surfing, which I'm so excited to be able to speak a little bit about you today, and has a new method for managing type 1 diabetes along with Kevin McMahon. Did I say that McMahon? Did I say that right?
You got it right.
Who is a co-author of your book, right?
Yes.
And you have 30 years past experience, and you directed one of the largest children's diabetes camp programs, which my daughter had the opportunity of going to for the last 4 years. And it's called Texas Lions Camp in Kerrville, Texas. And you served on many national boards and committees, including the National Certification for Diabetic Educators. And you also served as the chair of an organization and the U.S. Medical Licensing Examination Pediatric Item Writing Committee and the Academy of Pediatrics Committee of Native American Child Health. You've been regularly invited as an international speaker of type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes in children, plus the current epidemic of child obesity. You have authored multiple publications, been recognized for state and national awards. You've been involved and continue to lead community service programs. You've been married to your wife, Patsy, for 27 years, and you have 3 beautiful grown children.
You know, what you basically said is I have a really hard time saying no to a lot of things. That's probably a good summary of what you just introduced me as. But I appreciate it. It's very generous, and thank you very much for the introduction.
Thank you. I appreciate it. So I wrote a bunch of different questions that are helpful for me, and I like to do these interviews because I like to be able to help others who have same questions. And so I can't thank you enough for allowing me this opportunity. The first question I have is, can you tell me from a perspective of a pediatric endocrinologist, how can one live a healthy and active lifestyle while managing their diabetes?
Well, I think anybody can live a healthy lifestyle. It's something you have to choose to do. It's not something that you read out of the book. I think it's something you have to, at some point in your life, come to a realization of, is that you can put your diabetes in front of you, or you can put it behind you. And in some way, both are neither actually are healthy ways to do it. You have to put it at your side. And I say that to many of my patients. Many people that first encounter me have decided just to run away from it or to put it behind them, which basically means they're metaphorically ignoring it. Others put it in front of them as an obstacle they choose not to try to overcome. And I think in the span of a lifetime, you do both. You sometimes will put it in front of you. You'll use it as maybe as an obstacle. Maybe some people might say that's an excuse. Others will, for a period of time, put it behind them and pretend they don't have it, and that too can be extremely, negative and detrimental to their health. Most people learn through life experiences that the safest and the most logical place to put it is just to one side of them, and to do their best to tame it and to never get it too far away from them, not too far out of sight, but really to tame it. And I think that's the best metaphor I've heard people use over the years, and I'm certainly not the one that invented that metaphor, but I think it's the best way of looking at diabetes is that it's a partner. Whether you wanted that partner or not, you have to, at some point in your life, accept it as something that you can live with and hopefully direct or tame.
Thank you. And in your book, Sugar Surfing, you talk about maintaining situational awareness. To be a successful sugar surfer, you must be willing to look, think, act, and stay mindful and motivated with maintenance and repeat the process. How does this relate to managing blood sugars and diabetes with healthy habits and fitness?
Well, sugar surfing or living with diabetes is staying in the moment. My diabetes is not taking an insulin dose or eating food or checking a blood sugar. It's a continuum. It's like life. You know, I have to make decisions every day about my life, whether I have diabetes or not. Diabetes just adds another sort of subroutine, if you will, in how I live my life. And I try to accept the fact that I will make mistakes, that there are things about diabetes I will never understand or never be able to conquer. But as long as I'm willing to accept the fact that I can live with it and work through these problems and make decisions and learn from my mistakes as much as I learn from my successes, I couldn't ask anything more, either of myself or of a patient. There is no secret formula to doing this, in my opinion. It's just putting one foot in front of the other and doing the best I can, and supporting other people and letting other people support me. You know, that's the only thing I've learned in 50 years, almost 50 years of living with this, that makes any sense in the big picture.
Great, thank you. This is a little bit of a longer question, but this relates to some of the things that I have read in your book that I found so helpful. And like I said, when I find something helpful, I like to really share it with other people. So in your book, there are several topics discussed. There's what's called a DCC study. There's also 6 key concepts to sugar surfing and 3 virtues. In your book, Sugar Surfing, you talk about a study you participated in, and a 10-year study called, which is the DCC, Diabetes Control and Complications Trial. This studied people from ages 13 to 39 to determine what their hemoglobin A1C numbers are healthy. People often assume that as an athlete like myself, active, living a lifestyle that's healthy with a healthy eating plan, that I have a really good hemoglobin A1C and that my numbers are well regulated. People always ask me, what's your A1C? What are your blood sugars like? And I felt it so interesting in your book that it spoke to me, because this is what I tell everybody else, that so they asked me whether I'm controlled or not, and I feel like it's a very individualized thing. What I might be, what my levels might be, may not be what somebody else's are, and you've talked about that in your book, and it's very individual. And does your study confirm that?
I'll correct something. Maybe I misspoke in a previous discussion, but I was not technically, I was in the diabetes control and complications trial myself. I write about it in the book, about what I learned from that experience as a provider and what I read about that as an individual when I read the research on that. But I was never a study subject in the DCCT, so I just want to make sure I clarify that.
Oh, I appreciate that.
Make a mistake on that. But the point I was making with that I think that discussion was that the control and complications trial was simply done to make a point, and it was to prove something we had long suspected, specifically that if we took charge in this case it was a research study, if we could take charge of it and sustain a level of control that we thought was ideal over an extended period of time, and in this case roughly a decade, that we could obtain from that benefits that would live with us for years to come after that period of time. And that's actually been shown to be the case. Individuals who participate in this control study who reduced their A1C levels by 2% were able to reduce their risks of developing long-term complications and reduce their risk of developing long-term, or exacerbating, making worse, if you will, those complications in the years even after they've completed this study. Now, almost 25 years later, those individuals who participated in the diabetes control and complications trial have fewer complications. They are generally healthier people, even though after they finished the study, they went back to less ideal levels of control. I thought that was very exciting news to hear, and it told us that even just a modest improvement in our control compared to what we were before they entered the study had profound long-term effects. In fact, they call that the legacy effect, that there was a legacy effect from a 10-year period of tighter control that you stayed with you, even though you didn't necessarily continue that level of control after the study was over.
Oh, I really appreciate that. I think that's really one of the most beneficial pieces of advice I took out of that, because I do feel like hemoglobin A1C varies from non-diabetics to diabetics, and you have shown the different ways in your book of sugar surfing and go into a lot of details with that. So yeah, I feel like what my hemoglobin is and what your hemoglobin is very diverse. In your book, you also talk about 6 key concepts to sugar surfing. Is there any way you can please describe the 6 keys to sugar surfing and how a CGM plays a factor in that?
Well, I don't have the book in front of me right now in terms of all the various the points I made in the book in regards to that. Is there one particular concept or point you were most intrigued about, or I can certainly get it out and pull that up for you if you like.
No, we can move on. I'm sure that when people read your book, they'll understand it. I don't have it in front of me myself. I just know I finished reading your book, and it was so fabulous. I have learned more from you in that book than I have in all the years since 2000 that I've been living with diabetes. But
well, I have the book out here, and I know the passage you're referencing here, and there are several prompts and keys that I put in the book, and of the things I say, the first principle I say is know the basic sugar surfing skills well, use them all the time. And I do this all the time personally. I mean, there's a certain set of things we just kind of incorporate into our way of thinking that I use for sugar surfing. Things like pivoting, waiting for the bend, basal testing, looking back to check my basal overnight. And these have become just part of routine habit, much like you and I have a routine of waking up every morning and getting ready for the day ahead of ourselves. And we don't really think about that. But as I started to break it down, these are the things that I seem to do every day that are part of this. And I did write them down, and just so I can stay focused on them, I use my basic skills every day. I don't take a vacation from them, whether I'm at work or at home or literally on a vacation. The second one I thought is very important is to develop a habit of looking at my CGM very frequently. The other thing is to make sure that everything I do, I try to just put everything together. And it's not just insulin. It's the food I eat. It's the schedule I keep. It's the activity I do. It's whether I take the stairs or the elevator. I mean, I look at the continuum of my life of what I do, but I'm literally managing a line, if you will, that's embodied in the trend line. I'm trying to steer that line. I'm trying to steer it, much like you steer the path of a boat, or as I use the metaphor, to steer a surf through a rough surf. I'm always pushing myself to do a little bit better, and that's also one of the core skills. So incorporating it into your everyday life, focusing on the basics, doing it, and working on getting better, and trying to always pivot.
There are 3 virtues as presented in sugar surfing. You have patience, where you learn what is truly happening; consistency, which is a personal style approach defined through practice; and resilience, the most sustaining trait. It's an internal sense of strength, determination, and desire to succeed. Do you think you can please explain a little bit more about those 3 virtues? Because I learned a lot.
Well, I've taken care of lots of people. With diabetes over my 35 years, I suppose, of doing this, and you kind of formulate an opinion as to what people's skills and abilities are, and what makes them successful. And I found that being patient, which is one of the hardest things for me to do, actually, because I want things to happen faster, and I think most people are like that. Being patient is a tough one. But being patient patience is very important, whether it's waiting for the bend, waiting for your insulin to kick in, waiting to treat a low blood sugar as it's coming back up, waiting for a high blood sugar that's arcing up to turn around and pivot. Patience is an extremely important part of being able to do what I call sugar surfing. The other is being consistent, trying to have some sort of predictability in what you do, even though you know the results may not always be predictable, but at least you have a method that you've developed over time that's reliable. And I see that in well-controlled patients as well. And last but not least is the resilience issue, that life's going to throw you some left curves along the way, and things are not always going to work out the way you hope they will, but successful people seem to be able to kind of dust themselves off, get back up, get back on the path again, and continue on. And they don't give up very easily. And I think that's another part about resilience, is not trying something once or twice and saying, oh, that doesn't work for me, but actually working through it until they make it work for them. And so I think those are the three things that I try to internalize as the traits I see as of any successful person living with any chronic illness, but especially diabetes. Patience, consistency, and resilience. Those are the core virtues that I've seen over the 35 years of seeing people with these conditions and seeing those that succeed at it and triumph over it.
Thank you. Food, medicine, exercise, and stress have built-in time delays. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Well, time is, we live in that fourth dimension called time. Insulin, for example, does not work exactly the same time after an injection. It varies. Everything about food, how much we chew it, the amount of food, the hormonal state of our body, the metabolic state of our body will affect how we digest food. The other things that are in our meal, besides the primary carbohydrate, for example, can affect the digestion of the food. How well it's cooked can also affect food digestibility. So there's so many layers of variance piled on top of each other. It begs the question that you can't really predict anything except by watching it in the moment and having enough awareness of what's going on in the moment using either frequent blood sugar monitoring or a CGM, and then stepping in and making that critical decision about what do I do about that. Do I need to take more insulin? Do I need to override what my pump or my formulas are telling me? Do I need to take more food because I'm dropping faster than I would have thought I would have dropped? Well, you have to manage in the moment. And the fact that we have this capacity now to do that with information that we can get streaming into us allows that to be possible. People that fly airplanes have also told me they understand this metaphor quite well, is that they're constantly scanning over their dashboard of their airplane. They're constantly concerned about the wind currents, and they could be flying through a completely clear sky and hit what appears to be an air pocket and drop 5,000 feet. And they have to be prepared for that. The same thing can happen with a person with diabetes. Even though you can plan everything out and you can measure everything out, you can still get unpredictable results. And you have to accept that. In fact, chaos is part of sugar surfing. You have to accept that there's chaos. If everything happened as you expected to at the beginning of the day, quite honestly, life would be rather boring after a while if you knew everything that was going to happen to you from sun up to sundown. It's the unpredictability of life, which is kind of exciting in some ways. When it comes to blood sugars, it becomes frustrating, I realize, for a lot of people, because they wish they could do the same thing and have the same result all the time. The problem is that's not the way things work with our limited ability to manage diabetes with insulin, food, and exercise. Yes, we know how they work on a global scale in terms of dropping things, usually with exercise, usually with insulin, but we have lots of examples where we do these actions and sometimes the opposite actually happens. But at least since we have the wherewithal to be able to see this now with our CGMs or with frequent blood sugar management, we can make better decisions in the moment, as opposed to segregating those decisions to just 3 times a day or 4 times a day when we happen to take a shot. That's the secret of sugar surfing, is realizing you do have that control in the moment. You can't drive your car 100 feet without keeping your eyes open and keeping your hands on the wheel in most cases. So why should this be any different? And in fact, that's why I think people can do this so easily, because they can do other multi-complex task physical abilities like driving a car. That's the best metaphor I can use for that. And they successfully do it every day. They're scanning the horizon, looking in the back mirror. They're feeling the road. They can feel the car and through the seat and on their hands. and they're using every sense that they have available towards keeping that vehicle traveling as in a straight line between two lines the best they can. But even then, you know full well, Alyssa, that we sometimes drift between the lanes, even on a road, on a highway. And so the same thing applies with diabetes. It's just a different set of circumstances, a different set of rules. So sugar syruping is an intuitive thing, in my opinion. People just have not been taught to look at it quite that way. They've been taught to think very statically, as if everything I can tell you in your life can be put on a spreadsheet. And that's just not the way it works.
You know, it's so interesting, and I brought that up as a question, and just to speak about what you have shared, I actually put it to the test, and that was the most important thing I got out of your entire book. And I actually started chewing my food conscientiously a lot more slowly, and using all of the approaches that you have shared in regulating your blood sugars and the different ways you can do so. And I actually took that area of your book and used it, and my blood sugars have been so well regulated. I went to the gym this morning. I ate, I have a very strict diet that I eat, but I've now taken the food, like I eat rice cakes. Rice cakes dissolve pretty easily, and most people don't even chew them. They just go down. And I actually took a small bite and chewed it slowly, and I really made conscious effort of how I drank my protein shake. And I was like amazed, like my blood sugars were like in perfect range. And for me to have a perfect range of blood sugar, like shortly after a workout, because I'm usually either really low after a workout and I don't take insulin before a workout, I put it to the test this time, and your theory really worked. So I'm so glad that you shared that with everybody. And thank you for that. Your book has just been so helpful to me. And I know how much helpful it will be to others who go out and purchase it. So you have, as you reported in your book, you did a recent medical studies, and you reported that there's 21% increase in incidence of type 1 diabetes amongst children up to the age of 19. What do you think is causing this, and what can be done to curb this trend?
I think that diabetes is certainly on the rise for many reasons, one of which is that those of us with diabetes can have children. And so the genetics behind it, and we know there are genetics behind diabetes, are more widely perpetuated in the population. There's just more people that carry the genes that put them at risk for diabetes. And it's not just one gene, it's dozens of genes. And there are other factors besides the genes. There are things in the environment. Those things have been discovered over the years, over the last several decades. There are all sorts of environmental agents and infectious diseases that might trigger a response in the body that would result in losing your ability to make insulin. But you have to usually, even this isn't 100%, but you usually have to possess a tendency or a genetic risk or susceptibility to get the condition. Our bodies are constantly rebuilding themselves. You as an expert fitness individual know that. You're constantly rebuilding muscle and replacing your bone every few years. All that's where our bodies are in constant flux. And I think that the immune system is constantly protecting us against a legion of things that would do us harm. And sometimes the system is not 100% accurate, and it tends to turn inward on itself, whether it's in the form of diabetes, type 1 diabetes, whether it's in the form of rheumatoid arthritis, whether it's in the form of thyroid disease. And there is a long list of other things when the body can make that mistake and turn inward and start destroying its own tissues. We happen to have a condition where that tissue happens to be the cells that make insulin. And then we have to live our lives a certain way along the lines of what I've talked about with sugar syruping to manually, if you will, manually control a process, which up until then had been automatically regulated. So yeah, it's sugar syruping and just in general is the wave of the future, no pun intended, but I really think that's the way we need to look at managing this condition, no longer in a static fashion. Static is entry level. And people still need to learn some sort of static theory. But after that, you quickly realize an intelligent individual like you and your listeners here know that there's more to it than just following a recipe. If it was just a recipe, I could cook like an expert chef anytime. But it's more than just following a recipe. There's more nuance in it. And sugar surfing tells you how to do it. It doesn't tell you what to do. It tells you how to do it for yourself.
Exactly.
And there are no charts and graphs. They're just annotated images. I rejected the temptation to put any sort of graphs in there or any sorts of formulas, aside from just to say they're not consistent, like we said we were opening up this question with, and say there's so much chaos in our system, which I embrace. I embrace chaos. I expect chaos. And so because of that, I'm not fearful of it, and I'm not mad at it. I just say something chaotic's happening. I need to go in. I got to put both hands on the wheel. I got to steer through this thing. But that's fun. That's the fun part of it for me. And after a few months or years, you get really good at this, and you can start making it do what you want to do. And there's nothing more rewarding about this after years and years and years of feeling that this disease had control over you, that you can now steer it. And that's what's empowering, and that's what makes me want to keep doing it, is the fact that gives me that sense of empowerment.
Yeah, and it's funny because, like, you're probably going to laugh, but your words are in my head morning, noon, and night all the time, because I have learned. My daughter, as you know, has been in your Texas Lions camp for 4 years, and every year I come early to be able to listen to you speak, and every year you are so motivational, and you help us all learn as parents who have children with diabetes, which is a predominant amount of my viewers who are seeing you, which is another big reason why I appreciate you doing this interview with me, is we all learn so much. And it's exactly what you say, exactly to the T, and that's why I asked that question. And also, lately, this entire week, I do a lot of talking to myself and how I can better my diabetes and what can I do differently. I am learning also, as you mentioned in your book, I'm on 7 units of Lantus. I'm on shots. And I noticed there was a trend of 3 days of my blood sugars really high, in the 300s. I didn't get upset over it because I use the word fear. You cannot be fearful of a blood sugar. You have to do something about it. You have to be able to self-manage. And what I learned in that fear is if you let fear consume you, you can't be a positive individual. But if you attack that fear as you are and you say, all right, like you gave an example of for me, if I have a high blood sugar day, all you can do is self-manage. So what did I do? I took track. I write everything I do down in a journal, and I kept track. And in my journal, I was like, okay, I'm going to wait 3 days. And it was high 3 days. I went up to 8 units of Lantus. And sure enough, I woke up with my blood sugar within normal range. Was I fearful of 300s? No, because that's normal. All right, is it going to affect your hemoglobin A1C? Absolutely not for 3 days of a high blood sugar. But part of your sugar surfing that I have learned, even with a non-diabetic, is you're going to have peaks and flows, and it's a matter of how you have that self-control. So I really appreciate you elaborating on that, because like I said, that's the biggest question I get. What is your hemoglobin A1C? Is it going to go up for this for 3 days? And I'm so afraid. Well, I feel like if they read your book, they don't have to fear as much. So thanks for that.
Thank you.
And I'm also on shots, as I said, and I know you recently had said at the Lions camp that you took a pump break. So I want to know what your thoughts are on shots over pumps, and what are the benefits of pump breaks?
Shots and pumps I've evolved to the point of seeing them as equivalent ways of getting insulin into me. They require different sets of different expectations, different methods, I guess. It's not unlike the metaphor of driving an automatic transmission or a stick shift. That's kind of a choice too, and I like driving a stick shift as well. But it's the same thing. Now, the advantage is, and I'm not dismissing pumps. I wore a pump for 30 years, and I still have several pumps at home, and I may go back on one for a while too. I totally consider it a choice. It's not my control does not hinge on how I get my insulin. I don't mind taking additional injections using my pen versus doing it to the pump. Yes, the pump does offer a few special techniques like an extended bolus or a combination bolus, but in the book, as you see, there's a section in there about how I can actually link or chain shots together and get close to the same effect with injected insulin. So I found ways to work through that. For most people that would prefer to take fewer injections, an insulin pump, it seems to be an attractive alternative. It unfortunately also tends to give people a false sense of security because of the exactitude of the numbers and the technology. And you're almost in some ways handing your control over to the machine, whereas the machine is no better or worse than the human being that's attached to, because it's still driven by your decisions. You may program it, or your doctor may program it with settings that are there that you may or may not want to change, but you still have to execute when those doses are being given and even how they're being given. So the most well-tuned automobile with perfect air in all the tires can still run off the road in the hands of a poorly trained driver and somebody who doesn't know the rules of the road. And I think that's why the focus has always been, for me, on the human being and the individual. I've always considered pumps or injections as options. There was a time when I thought pumps were, everybody should be on a pump. And if you want to go on a pump, that's great. I have no problems with that. On the other hand, I know very well-managed individuals like myself who are doing injections. In fact, two of my partners here in the office had diabetes, and they use injections. They were on pumps for a while, and they realized they could do just as well with a pen or a shot as they could with a pump. So I like pumps. I formulated the 12 laws of pumping, as you saw in the book, and the number one of which is it's no better or worse than the person is attached to. So I don't care so much how somebody gets their insulin. It's the quality of their decisions, not the expense of their technology, that drives the outcomes for us, most of us with diabetes. Now, children love pumps, and a lot of times children don't have the same mindset as older people about the injections, and it does make life a little bit easier for kids. So I understand why kids like the convenience of a pump. But I will tell you, in my clinic, I see many boys and girls, and I've seen adults before, who do a very poor job in even dosing themselves with a pump. They forget frequently to take a dose of insulin, much less take it properly or when they're supposed to take it through a pump. So they are what's called riding the basal. You've heard people say that before, where they're not really taking anything in terms of mealtime insulin. They're just simply running off the basal rate. So pumps can be a powerful tool, but they can also be weapons as well. In a pump is 300 units of insulin, which could be lethal to some people. And oftentimes we're handing that to young people and children. I'm surprised we don't have more problems than we do. Fortunately, we don't. But fortunately, most people respect the power of these devices. But sometimes after we've been on them for a while, we get a little bit lazy, I guess is a good word, or lackadaisical about it, and we don't use them to their full capacity. So we may wind up with the same level of control on an insulin pump that we had while we were on injections. So at least if you measure it by an A1C. But that doesn't mean people don't like their pumps, because they do like the convenience. Many people like that ability to not have to pull out a pen, not have to stick a needle in themselves, and I respect that. I totally respect that. And so I see it as strictly a choice. Like I said, between an automatic transmission and a stick shift, it's a choice.
That's so interesting that you mentioned this, and this is why I'm so happy that you're speaking with me today, because I have so much knowledge myself, having a daughter with diabetes and having lived with it, being an athlete. I seek regular endocrinological care. I see a nutritionist. I eat a very healthy, well-balanced diet. I was on a Medtronic pump for well over 3 years, and before that I was on an Omnipod. And what one pump works for somebody may not work for another. That's why there's so many different ones out there. It's a personal preference. I took a pump break a year ago. I've been off the pump now almost 2 years, because for me, it just felt like a nuisance. I just felt like it just deterred my everyday life in so many ways. And I just felt it was healthier for me being on it so long to try to see what it was like without it. When you go from being on a pump for so long to being on shots, you completely forget how a regimen is with shots. And when I have your book downloaded, so everybody needs to know you don't necessarily have to order on Amazon. I paid for it and downloaded it, and I carry it on my phone with me wherever I go. So if I made little notes, if I want to read something, I flag the page. So one of the things I flagged and reread this morning is there's different types of insulin, and people will say, oh, what do you think of this insulin, or what do you think of this insulin? Are there different types of insulin? And pretty much insulin is insulin. They work maybe a little bit differently, maybe some act faster than others, but people are so afraid, like Lantus is being discontinued or not necessarily sold. I'm not sure of the situation. I'm still on Lentis. After this month, I have to switch over. And people are so concerned with, is there a difference between this? Is there a difference between that? Novolog's not covered in my insurance. I had to switch to Humalog. I think people fear, like we're going back to the word fear insulin as well. So maybe you can share a little bit about the different types of insulin and what your thoughts are when people are asking in these support groups, is this a good source of insulin or is this a good source of insulin? What would you say about that?
Oh, sure. One of the perspectives I guess I have is I've had this for 50 years almost, and I've gone through all sorts of different types of insulins, all the way back to the old-fashioned beef pork insulins, which were coming from animals, to pork insulin, to human insulin, then to analog insulin. So I've seen 3 or 4 paradigm shifts in insulin. Maybe 5 now with the not just the analog insulins, now the concentrated analog insulins like the Trujillo, you have Levemir, you have Degludec perhaps coming out in the next year or so. These long-acting basal insulins, which are really, some of them were actually designed for type 2 patients more so than type 1s, but they're finding a market in the type 1 population. But insulin analogs were made to help the insulin work faster. The actual part of the insulin molecule that attaches to the insulin receptor itself is left largely unchanged. So they don't want to increase the strength, if you will, of the insulin. They just want to increase the speed at which it releases, or just slow it down on the flip side to make it slower. But even still, insulins, despite the cartoons they show us in terms of how they work, are highly variable within the same person. They've shown that before. Even Lantus, for example, which is supposed to have a nice steady baseline effect, there's research studies which show a significant, almost peaking effect in some cases with Lantus. And I've noticed that myself. It's something I have to be mindful of with sugar surfing, is that every now and then my Lantus may show a bit of a peak, and in other days it seems like it's not working at all. And that's when I'm taking what I think is the same dose. That's because there is more than the 3 things I mentioned earlier, more than just food, insulin, and exercise that influence this. There's a whole host of internal factors in our bodies that will push our blood sugars up or down, which we don't have any awareness of sometimes, stress being the more common one. Sometimes you are aware of stress, of course, but infections and things that we get in the community, some of our infections are subclinical. We actually don't have any external signs. You don't have a sore throat. You don't have a cold or sniffle. But you're actually infected by a virus. And they estimate that some of us have anywhere from 7 to 10 subclinical viral infections each year. Those things could affect how we metabolize insulin, how we metabolize food, and could conversely affect our blood sugar levels. But insulin itself is a variable substance. It's not even released in the human body in a consistent fashion. It's been shown in a study that was done in 1987 by Dr. Kenneth Polanski that the average adult without diabetes releases insulin about 11 times a day. About 11 waves of insulin are released in a day. If they're overweight or obese, it's about 12 waves of insulin. And that's interesting to think about, because those of us that take insulin sometimes may take up to 10, 11, 12 shots a day, depending on the circumstances. And if you're a sugar surfer like I am, I do easily take sometimes 10 or 12 shots a day. There are some times when everything is calm, the seas are calm, so to speak, and I can take 3 shots for the 3 meals and my Lantus. That's 4, and everything's fine. But I'll tell you, that's the minority. Most of the time I'm constantly touching up or adjusting or juggling things to keep that line, to steer that line, simply because of unanticipated stress, unanticipated activity. Even our basal rates that we take insulin for, if you look at what the true definition of those, what it is, it's meant to keep you steady in the absence of any forces that would push you up or down. Well, what's that mean? Well, that means you're not going to go do heavy exercise or walk up a flight of stairs you didn't anticipate, but that's life. Sometimes you have to go do something you didn't anticipate, but that basal rate's been injected into you or is running through a pump, and it doesn't know that you're not what you're doing. And so you're going to shift up and down. You're going to have some lows. You're going to have some highs. And so that's the secret of sugar surfing, is accepting that and being ready for it when it happens, so you can steer it back into place with nudges and pivots, as you've heard me describe before. And that's just being mindful. And the hardest part, of course, is when you're sleeping. at least I can set my sensors so where they trigger off when I go below a certain threshold, and I'll act to bring them back up. But I practice them just as much as you practice your workout routines. I practice my glycemic routines, and I know these routines by heart, just like you're learning those yourself.
Yeah.
And I know the range of responses my insulin gives me. And 3 units usually drops me from 140 on a straight line down to about 100. Every now and then it shoots a little bit more than that. Every now and then it doesn't work that well. But on average, it's more like a zone. It usually gets me about 3 units will drop me about 40 or 50 points. And I can use that because I've practiced it so many times. 180, 6 units will drop me from 180 to about 100. So again, practice, practice, practice. And then when I see it going up at an angle through 180, I have to factor in maybe a 10 or 20% adjustment on top of that, and maybe take 8 units to turn the curve and bring it down. But, and I can even accentuate it by exercising. I've shown you that before in the workshops. I can walk for 5 miles and take 2 units to drop a high down, as opposed to taking 4 units and sitting on the sofa and doing that way. So that's a mix and match, kind of a use whatever methods are there in front of you. I do that a lot too. So sugar surfing is innovative. It allows you to use whatever you learned in the past to apply for whatever's in front of you right now.
Absolutely.
And then you get that much more experience the next time around. That's what's the beauty about it. That's what's so empowering about it, as I said, because it's teaching you about you. There's no book about me. I'm writing it about me in a way. You're writing your own book too. And everybody that sugar surfs is writing their own unique book. And it'll just get bigger and better and more richer and in depth the longer they go on. And that's the beauty of surfing. And then they'll be more empowered, as I said. They'll want to keep doing this. It'll make such a difference to their lives, and they'll feel that they're finally in control of something, as I said, that they felt in the past was controlling them.
And that's, since I've read your book, I've literally taken every single thing that you've written about and applied it on myself. And I will tell you, my sugars have never been better, because every single thing you have said in this book, I've used to my advantage and applied it and have been able to self-manage, but also understand not only the self-management to be able to take care of yourself, but utilize different strategies and techniques that you can apply them as well. And that's been so beneficial to me. So I really, really appreciate you elaborating on that. But here's something interesting. I know you're a huge, huge supporter in a CGM, and a big popular one is Dexcom. I ordered Dexcom. I'm getting ready to go on it. My entire competition season, my doctors have begged me to go on it. Everybody fears the sensor. That's one of my fears. I remember what it's like to have it around. You don't want people talking. You're insecure. For me, my doctors have felt where it was really hard to measure my workout routine with my exercise, when I eat more carbs, when I eat less carbs, times a day, intensity. So I'm excited because now I'm off season and I'm going on Dexcom, and it'll be interesting.
We're asking you if you're just getting the Dexcom.
I'm sorry?
You froze up when you said you were just getting the Dexcom.
Oh, sorry. I'm going on Dexcom, and my doctors have been asking me to go on it through my entire competition season. And my sugars varied so greatly between exercise, the intensity, the food I ate when I was in high carbs, low carbs, everything changed. And I'm kind of like a science experiment. So when I compete next year, I'm going to be on Dexcom through my competition season. Now I'm going to go off season on Dexcom now. And I know that you're a really big supporter in a CGM. And like I said, I'm nervous about going on it only because of carrying the sensor around and what it feels like. Can you tell me a little bit about your experience and why you're such an advocate for a CGM, and also Dexcom, and what the positive effects of it are living with having the Dexcom and active and healthy lifestyle? Why do you think people should use a CGM?
Well, when I first got a CGM, it was actually an Abbott Navigator. And it was about, I guess, 8 years ago, roughly now. I think I've written about some of that in the book, but I was having lots of low blood sugars that were hitting me quickly, and I was not aware of the symptoms as much as I am now, and especially during the night. And I was I was very fearful in some ways. Like I said before, I'm not fearful anymore, but I was fearful that, I'd just keep having these low blood sugars, and one of these days, one of them would just get too low, and something would happen to me. And so getting that technology was a game changer, because it finally gave me the ability to see and teach myself some of the things that I was doing that caused them myself. I was actually causing some of these things and not really realizing it. And so it taught me taught me how to better manage my diabetes. And in doing so, I eliminated these low blood sugars, which were becoming the bane of my existence. I was, I didn't like waking up and having my wife have glucose, honey in my mouth, or having to give me a shot of glucagon. And I felt like, well, this is going to be the rest of my life, however long it lasts. I'll be having these lows every 6 months, and there's always going to be one I can expect to happen. Well, I don't feel that way anymore. I don't feel like I have to expect or anticipate the next big low, which I would dread that. Honestly, I would very much dread that. And I didn't like to get low in front of patients, or certainly not in the car. And so, I checked my blood sugar, but I didn't check it enough, I suppose, either. And my A1C was around 7.2, 7.1. That's kind of what it averaged at the time. But I was still having these lows. And when I got the CGM, that was a total game changer. And it empowered me so much. And then it took a couple of years, and I started realizing what this was teaching me. And that's really how the book came about. What was I learning from this? How could I take what I saw and apply it to make a better attempt the next time? And that was the evolution of sugar surfing. But it was a game changer, and it's that's the reason I have a personal investment in this as a patient. And that's why I stay on mine. I am literally a continuous glucose monitor. I have been on a device almost continuously with very short breaks, no more than 2 days, I think, in the last 6 or 7 years. I firmly believe in that technology. Now, I know that there are people out there who do sugar surfing and check their blood sugar 20 times a day, and that's great too. That just speaks to a myth about sugar surfing you may have seen me recently write about, which was you have to have a CGM to do it. No, you don't. You just have to have frequent data and have to make decisions with that, high-quality decisions with that data. You don't have to be on a pump to sugar surf. You can be on shots, as we've just been talking about. You don't have to be an adult to do this. We have kids whose parents are doing this with them during certain elements of it. And the most outrageous thing I've heard lately, and I think it's because of people not reading the book, is some people think it's a diet, that we're pushing some sort of high-carb diet or low-carb diet. And sugar surfing is totally agnostic to what you eat. It just tries to teach you how to deal with the things you do eat and what you need to do with them. For example, when I eat a low-carb meal, I oftentimes don't take any insulin, don't need to. There's no evidence that I need to do it based on my glycemic profile after I eat low-carb foods. So I'm not. That's one of the major 4 myths that I have to dispel about sugar surfing. It's not a diet. It's not just CGM. It's not a pump, and it's not kids or adults. And people that have read the book know that. But unfortunately, as the book is becoming more popular, people are reading between the lines and projecting some of their own biases about what they think is in the book. And one of the things that got me a little bit of initial criticism was when I was posting a story about, it's in the book, about the sugared cereal, how I dealt with sugared cereal. I don't eat sugared cereal for breakfast. I rarely do. But just because parents are always giving their kids sugared cereal and they want to know how to do it, I'm not going to deny them the ability to know that. So I showed that example, and it's in the book. You've seen it. And that's just a nice example of how you work through a problem, how you critically evaluate the situation and then progressively work through the problem. Now, I was able to do that in 3 attempts. Now, sometimes it takes 4 or 5. Sometimes you get it in 2. Sometimes you get it in 1. And so the point is, though, you have to be persistent, and that gets back to your virtues. Be consistent in what you do. Be resilient, and that really speaks to resilience. Yeah, you may fall flat on your face the first 2 or 3 attempts. And if you just say, I give up, I'm going to walk away, you'll never accomplish anything, whether it's in life or in sugar surfing. And so I think that's important for listeners to remember.
Yeah. I've written so many questions, but I know we're almost out of time, so I'm just going to think of really important things. Because I really wanted to do this because I promote diabetes and fitness and how to live a healthy lifestyle. And I just think it is so important, not only as a diabetic, but a non-diabetic, to know how to care for your body, what you feed it, what kind of fitness level you have. We are no different than anybody else in this world. We live like a regular person, and diabetes is not an obstacle. It might be a deterrent, it might be a disturbance, but it doesn't mean that you can't live your life happily, healthy, and with an active lifestyle. I have to drink water. I drink 3/4 to a gallon of water a day to hydrate my body, feed my body. You need as much water as you need food. I mean, that's as important as anything. I get all the time, well, can I have a drink like Propel that has flavored water, or does carbonated like flavored water like ice drinks help me? Yeah, they're good. I mean, I don't say don't drink them. Everybody likes to have a little treat outside of water, or a Diet Coke, or an energy drink. We all want to be able to have this. But you can have it, but you just need to know how much water to drink. So I know you talked a little bit about hydration and the importance of it, especially as a diabetic. Are you able to discuss that a little bit and your thoughts on hydration?
Yeah, I call water God's soft drink. I've done that for a long time with when I was spending a lot of my professional time addressing childhood obesity in the last 10 or 15 years. There's a lot of products out there, and we live in a society that drives on capitalism. That's what we live here for. And some of those things involve selling things to us and dressing them up a certain way to make them very attractive, and then putting things in them that may be very sweet, that biologically attracts us to drink them, which may not be very healthy for us in the end. And there's such a wide array of choices, and that's wonderful. I completely applaud choice, but we have to make the smartest choices. You make great choices. I mean, absolutely, water and hydration. That's what we all came from the ocean in some ways. We all need that water. I don't think we get enough. I agree with you completely. I think from the standpoint of diabetes, hydration is always good. It keeps those kidneys working well. It keeps all the blood flowing to your extremities. It can actually be used in some cases as a therapeutic tool to lower high blood sugar, because the sugar in our blood is basically suspended in water, in a liquid. And if we are dehydrated, it will concentrate the amount of sugar in a smaller space and make the number go up. So one of the biggest or most interesting things people like to brag about with diabetes is, especially kids, is how high their blood sugar was, and they'll try to compare with each other, which is not really a great thing to do. But the reality is, when your blood sugar goes up to 400, 500, 600, you are already, by definition, dehydrated when that happens. There was an interesting study that was done a number of years ago, where they completely removed the insulin out of a person's body, and they just gave plenty of fluids to them such that their kidneys could eliminate the sugar. Well, the kidneys are pumps, as you well know. They eliminate the waste products from your body. And if you have two functioning kidneys that have adequate blood flow, which means good hydration, going to them, your blood sugar can be maintained roughly around 300 milligrams per deciliter. Okay, so I teach this to the doctors here. If somebody comes in with a 400 or 500 blood sugar, I can sometimes get that down simply by starting an IV and getting them some saline water to drop that blood sugar before I even give them insulin to drop it, because their blood is concentrated because it doesn't have enough water in it. And so if I'm not in diabetic ketoacidosis and I have a 400 or 500 blood sugar, one of my first therapies, besides just insulin, is to grab my bottle of water.
Grab my bottle of water, only have it in a cup.
Exactly. And that's a tool. And so, I use this metaphor. I'm not sure I put it in the book, but this is like in that movie Madagascar, when Lenny looks out at all the animals and he sees everybody turns into a pork chop or something. I said, I look at everything around me. Here's the tool. And here's a tool. My legs are a tool for burning off sugar. I look at the world as tools, and how can I leverage those tools to control that blood sugar line? That line is just an imaginary thing. It's something I can visualize. It's how I can conceptualize what I'm doing. But walking up the stairs is a tool. When I eat my food is a tool. If I eat my carbs last or first, is that a tool? It can be. If I drink water, it can be a tool also. So the world all of a sudden becomes more than just insulin and exercise and what food I put on my plate. Just even, like I said, even the order in which I do things. Even if I chew my food more, as you've already pointed out, I can affect the glycemic profile of my food, the fingerprint, if you will, of my food. So I'm constantly exploring new tools, and sugar surfing is an example of exploring those tools.
Exactly. And it's funny because I have my pen, I have my sugar, liquid sugar, I carry glucose tablets, and I have my glucometer with me. And as you saw, my water, And you have to be prepared at all time. And so many people think I need to eat candy, or I can have a cupcake, or it's an excuse for me to be able to eat. My daughter will even say sometimes, oh, she wants her blood sugar to be low because we eat very, very healthy. We don't eat sugar cereals. We don't buy candy in our house and bolus for it. She can have it for treats, but it's just to encourage a healthy lifestyle. And so that's why I carry the right tools that you need to carry at all time with you, because you never know when you're going to need them. So,
at camp, I made this comment to some of the boys, and it was actually an old metaphor. I don't think they really remember the reference, but you and I are old enough to know what the Rambo movies are all about, right? And for those kids who understood it, they seemed to get it. I say, Rambo could be dropped behind enemy lines with a compass and a knife, and he would take out the enemy because he knew what he was doing. And I think that's what sugar surfing is all about. Is the control is all up here, And if you just have the core essential tools, then it's the choices you make, the order in which you make them, how often you make them, just like Rambo. And you just have to have your basic information. You can take it from there. You don't have to have the bazooka. You don't have to have the nuclear bomb.
Exactly.
You have a good head on your shoulders that's properly trained and experienced and has good judgment. And younger kids, that certainly comes to the parents are helpful there too. But as you get older, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Absolutely. And what's interesting also is because I'm very big on obesity. I'm going to be blogging and doing a lot more to try to prevent childhood obesity and set an example as a parent for children. A lot of the times I get, well, I have to keep feeding my kid because their sugars are low. Well, that's why exactly what we're talking about today, why you have to be able to sugar surf, learn self-management, use the right tools to treat your blood sugar and get that control. Don't use food, junk food, sugar products that you want to eat because you're diabetic, you wouldn't necessarily eat as a tool to treat blood sugar. I would say use the guidelines of what your endocrinologist suggests as a fast-acting carb and go from there. And these, for me, are the best. When you're running, at night when you're sleeping for your children, you don't have to wake them up and give them a glucose tablet or shove an Oreo in their mouth. You just give them to this and they go right back to sleep, and then you monitor your blood sugar. So
right.
I want to talk to you about Lions Camp real quick, and then I know we're out of time. My daughter, I said, has attended Lions Camp for 4 years in a row, and she's had the most fabulous experience. 4 years ago, it was her first time ever going to a sleepaway camp, and of course, a diabetic sleepaway camp. She's made such wonderful friends, had great social experience, great support. She even won that little medal that you get, the necklace that you get, that said she had good diabetic care for learning the first time for her bunk or whatever. And she really understood what it's like to live with other children, and other children also relate to each other, because it's very hard when you're in school. There aren't too many diabetics at the same age or in the same school, or you don't know too many other diabetics, so your support system is in a diabetic community. So I want to ask a little bit about how you started Texas Lions Camp 30 years ago, and what you feel people get out of it and the importance of it.
Well, I mentioned this to the kids at one point about how I got to camp. And there was no grand plan. I was volunteering as a research subject for in an office of the doctor who ran the camp at the time. And as they were drawing my blood, they mentioned, "Oh, we have this camp for children with diabetes. Would you be interested in maybe going there?" And I literally said, "Sure, why not?" And I think that was it. So, from that beginning, now 35 years later, I've been running the camp for 25 years, and it's become an integral part of my life. One of my daughters found her husband there. My kids have worked there. My wife has worked there. I've seen thousands and thousands of kids there. I met over 1,000 medical professionals I've had the pleasure and honor of knowing over the years. So one small little act, which you could not predict, has had such a profound effect. And I think that's an important message, and it sounds a lot like Forrest Gump, I guess, sometimes.
I said, for everything, run, Forrest, run.
Yeah, it really does. And you think you plan everything in advance, or you have all these grand plans, and then things happen to you. Quite honestly, Alyssa, some of the greatest things that have ever happened to me were things that happened by chance and circumstance. And again, that's what sugar surfing is, learning how to manage those things, or at least to deal with them as they occur. But the camp is a great example of that. And at this last camp, the second camp this year, a young man came and sang for us. He was a Western singer. He was a camper of ours. He was a former patient of mine, and he told the boys and girls how much of a difference this camp made. How he wrote his second song, which put him on the course to write songs as a professional. I mean, his career basically, he said, got started at diabetes camp. And I would look out at the boys and girls and say, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, that girl could be the governor of Texas. That little boy could be a senator. This other girl could be president. I mean, who knows what you can be? We know you can be a Supreme Court justice and have diabetes now. So there's no limits anymore to what people can and can't do with having this condition. And I just look over them and I see all this potential every time I go there. And I know that life's a journey, and some of the kids struggle with their control, but I can also tell parents this, and I try to reassure parents this: some of the best control people I know now may have struggled terribly when they were young, may have resisted, fought their condition, and they had to come to grips with they had to come to their own peace with it. And once they get to that peace, they thrive and they move forward. Hopefully that was not too traumatic a process, but when it's occurring, it's very difficult for the families to watch. It's challenging for us to deal with, but I've been doing this long enough now to know that there is a light at the end of most people's tunnels, and that you can get through it, and you'll have your teenage years or what have you. Now, conversely, I know that people who just glide through those years and do wonderfully, and then they hit the adult years, and then they struggle. So it goes both ways. So, there's nothing straight line about life. It just isn't. It moves around. It fluctuates. It has ebbs and flows, just like blood sugars do. And, the short time I'm able to work with them as a provider and my team, I try to convey to them that you can live a long life with this. And the older I get with this, I guess the more that message means to me, and hopefully to them, that I've had it for 50 years, and my first 15 years were not well controlled by anybody's standards today. I was on one shot a day. I didn't check blood sugars because we couldn't check blood sugars then. There were no pumps. There was one shot of insulin you took a day, and that was it. Yet I'm still here. So I sometimes have to be guarded when I try not to express surprise when people are concerned about taking 15 shots a day or having an A1C that's not, it's 7.1 versus 7.0. When my first A1C was 10.8, it was probably 10 my whole adolescence, and I'm still here. So some of that's luck. I'm sure there's something genetic about that. I know there is. I can't control that, and I can't worry about it. All I can do is take care of the right now and what's ahead of me. And what's 20 years ago, I can't worry about. I'm not gonna dwell on the past. But I know that kids out there with diabetes can live as long, if not longer, than kids without diabetes, because they have a chronic illness, and those that take good care of that chronic illness will have a longer life in many ways. That was said almost 100 years ago by Dr. William Osler, the famous internist. He said the best way to live a long life is to develop a chronic illness and take good care of it. There's nothing more true, and that was true in 1890 or whenever he said it, just as much as it's true right now.
I always say diabetes isn't a disability, it's an ability, because it only makes you motivated and show people that you are like anybody else. And I have to have you show everybody your hat, because every year at Lions Camp, you walk around with that hat. And I know with the awards ceremony, everybody wants to win awards, but they want the 3 hats that you give away the most. Can you show us your hat and why you wear it?
Well, this is actually, I'm giving you a preview. This is the hat for next year. This is our coordinator wanted to have a sloth as a hat, and we kind of went back and forth on it. We finally said, sure, let's do it, because we've had dogs and we've had iguanas and we've had kangaroos and koalas and so on. So this is a sloth, and so next year's theme will be a sloth. We'll have a catchy little punny phrase on our T-shirts for that. And so Patsy Reyes, who's our outstanding camp coordinator, she's going to be responsible for doing that. Let me say one other thing, though, on the previous comment. I think that diabetes is an opportunity. And that's one way of looking at it. It's an opportunity, and not everybody takes advantage of that opportunity, but it is in a certain way, it's an opportunity. It doesn't have to be a curse. It doesn't unless you want it to be. And I tell people I respect the way they want to view their diabetes. I can't make them think any which way. All I can do is try to lead by an example. But I see it as an opportunity to do better. And as I've said, living longer by making better choices. The people with diabetes who follow up and get routine medical care, stay hydrated, watch their control, they stand to live longer than their peers who may be smoking and drinking excessively and living, stressful lifestyles. They have the ability to actually excel and actually outlive those individuals. So I'm not sure it's as much of a curse as what I used to think it was when I was growing up. But I didn't have a me to talk to me about that. And I think the future is very bright. And I see people excelling with this condition all the time. And yes, there are more of us now. You can say that's unfortunate, but there are. And we probably will have more over time. There are probably reasons that we are yet to discover as to why it's on the increase, both type 1 and certainly type 2. But I think we have the hope of being able to use sugar surfing and our better understanding of managing in the moment to steer a better course than we have in the last 30 years.
I agree, and that's kind of why, like, as a fitness competitor, it is so difficult. People think, oh my God, I'm so well regulated. It's actually harder being a fitness competitor than it is a triathlete, a marathon runner, because my intensity of my workouts and the time of days I eat are so difficult. I'm going on Dexcom as a little test for myself, but also to regulate and live a longer, healthier lifestyle. I really feel like you can only better yourself. And the only way to better yourself is you have to have a positive mindset, drive, motivation, determination, the will, and not look at this as something that you should feel sorry for. Look at it as if you can set an example for yourself and anybody else who wants to learn from you, and all you can do is get better. And that's what I try to do. I have many bad days with my diabetes, but then when I have a good day, I'm like, oh great, it's a good day, it's a new day. Live for today and worry about tomorrow when it comes. And
well, you don't back away from a challenge, Alyssa. And that's the thing. That's what defines your success, is that you see a challenge, you take it. You're one of those people that runs into a situation as opposed to running away from a situation. And that's the kind of attitude that builds better control, because you're not afraid to take on the challenge.
Right. Thank you. I have one last question, and then I know we actually have to go because you've been so kind to set this valuable time in your busy schedule for me. I feel like we talk about obesity, fitness, and health. As a pediatric endocrinologist, do you work with any athletes, future prospective athletes? And if so, how do you help support the different types of athletic sports with children?
How do I support?
Do you have any athletes who compete, child athletes who compete that have diabetes? And
yes,
how do you help?
Yes.
Like my endocrinologist, I have a really strict discipline schedule where I see them certain times. I give my blood sugar in at certain times. We change things, like we're in close communication with the dietitian. Do you have athletes as a pediatric endocrinologist? And how do you support them in their sport so that they can use your sugar surfing approach to stay regulated?
Absolutely, I have. Over the years, I've had boys and girls who have been competitive softball players. Many girls have been who won championships, actually. Young men who have played baseball and won state championships and been drafted into the major leagues. A young man I took care of 20 years ago who played for the Jaguars and the Rams, who was not unlike Eric Pasley, who was the singer. And the nice thing is that all these people achieved what they wanted to achieve in life, and the diabetes didn't get in the way. They worked through it. They dove in head first. They took the responsibility they needed to manage their diabetes and succeed at their given sport. So yes, I have managed these individuals, and they all have, for the most part, very, very supportive families that supported them, that backed them up. But I think that goes part and parcel with any successful child or adolescent athlete, is having that good family support. There are rare exceptions when you excel without having a family behind you. But I think that's the secret. It's good family support, an attitude, a very good, strong work ethic, practice ethic, doing things when people aren't, doing the right thing, so to speak, as you heard, when somebody's not looking. The people I've seen that excel, they get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, do their practice on Saturday or Sunday morning when everybody else is sleeping in. Those are the same type of people who are more willing to check their blood sugar a little bit more often, be more careful what they're eating. They have a goal. They've set a goal for themselves, and they're not going to let anything stand in the way, and they'll incorporate their diabetes management into the attainment of that goal, and they have family to support them in that mission. That's what I see.
And it's also really important that people see a dietitian or a nutritionist, because it helps explain really quickly, and then we can let you get back to what you need to do as well. But why do you think it's so important for anybody, especially living with diabetes, to see a nutritionist? And what kind of dietitian do you suggest?
Oh yeah, it's a team approach to diabetes. And when I was trained with diabetes educators, I am a certified diabetes educator. I think there's only 2 other people that have had that credential longer than I that are also doctors. You have to have a good CDE. You need to have an understanding physician. It's all part of a team. You need to have an experienced dietitian, CDE, nutritionist. Ideally, you need somebody, a mental health or psychosocial support as well. We have a social worker here that helps a lot of our families as well when they're struggling with diabetes in the family. And so the team approach to diabetes is the best approach. It's not just prescriptive, it's supportive. And supporting people is the secret, and empowering them. And again, sugar stripping is the most empowering thing on the planet, because it teaches you to teach yourself, and you learn from your own experiences. I think that, as a nutritionist, you should see one. My ideal would be you see one every time you go to the doctor. That would be the ideal way to do it. Unfortunately, in this day and age, that's getting harder and harder to do. I used to run a program where I had access to 2 dietitians in my center, and every patient saw the dietitian every time they came in. I can't tell you how many issues that we uncovered by having them see the dietitian before they saw the diabetes educator, because we found that while they thought they were doing what they needed to do, they were sometimes missing the mark, either under or oftentimes overdosing themselves on carbohydrates when they sincerely thought they were doing what was proper. So it's not they were trying to do something wrong, but they just didn't have a good grasp or comprehension of the nutritional management of diabetes. And in this day and age, Alyssa, there's just not enough time to teach people. And what needs to be done is we need to look at diabetes more as like a college course almost, or you have to have more time. The 2 hours you get at diagnosis when you're in shock, in awe of the diagnosis, is not enough. And then, of course, you go out and teach yourself, and sugar stripping helps once you've got those basics down. But a lot of people don't even get those basics very well, or they'll get them turned around. They won't have a full understanding of what they're doing, and they'll fall back on static methods. Because static means I don't have to think about what I'm doing. I just follow what the doctor tells me, follow what the nurse tells me, and everything will be okay, right? Well, no, it won't be. I think you already know that. But it's education is our biggest shortcoming in this country and worldwide, because it's not a drug, it's not a machine. It's just good old 2 people talking to each other, trying to explain the concept so the other person really gets it, so the light bulb comes on. There are 3 steps to this, and I write about it in the book, I think. There's knowledge, okay, or education. And that's what everybody basically gets. They go up to a conference and they check off the box that they got education. Well, it doesn't say anything about whether you understood anything in there. I could go sit through a course on nuclear physics and I could check the box that I attended the workshop, but I may not understand one bit of what was discussed. But understand that knowledge has to translate into understanding, but there's still a missing step. Understanding has to translate into behavior. There are a lot of people with PhDs that are in prison who are really smart people who made very poor choices. So it comes down to the choices you make. Yes, it makes sense. You're going to make better choices if you have a good understanding about what you're doing. But that's the 3-step process. And our system is not geared at all to changing the latter 2 nearly as much as we are at delivering the first, which is to shove you in a class or have you sit down with an educator for 2 hours. They check all the boxes. They talked about this with you. You nodded your head, and they think you know everything. And then off you go, and never to be seen by a diabetes educator, maybe for years after that. And we wonder why people struggle.
And it's interesting that, like I said, this is why I like to blog and do these interviews with a lot of athletes I'm interviewing as well. And it's because And I could talk endlessly. I have so many questions that people have asked me that you are so motivational and provide people with this information on. And it's like, I want to learn, I want to better myself, and you have helped me, and I'm trying to help other people. And so I'm so glad that we've had this opportunity to talk. And I have so many other questions, and I know we can't go on forever, but I feel like a lot of the topics in your book that I already knew about, but I just didn't know the extent of how to apply them. And when I approached you to possibly do this interview, it was like, oh my God, all these questions about obesity, about fitness, about health, about hydration, how to self-manage, motivation, control, seeing your doctor, proper care. This is everything I've learned over the course of the years as an athlete, but you don't have to be an athlete. You don't have to be an older adult. You don't have to be a young adult. It's anybody. Anybody needs to apply themselves, to manage themselves, to take care of themselves. And I can't thank you enough for speaking with me today. I'm sure everybody will want to know what is next for you, Dr. Ponder. Do you intend on having a new book come out? Where do you see yourself going from here?
Well, I'm on October 10th, I'll be doing a sugar surfing workshop in Dallas at Baylor Medical Center. It'll be my third one in Dallas. In January, end of January, I'll be doing a workshop in Miami, Florida. In April of next year, 2016, we'll be having an advanced diabetes workshop at the camp. And you may have heard me announce that at camp this year. But that'll be a one-day event on April 23rd. And then an exciting thing we're going to resurrect is a diabetes cruise, which will include a sugar surfing workshop. It'll be out of Galveston, Texas.
Oh.
It'll be June 12th to June 19th, and our ports of call are Galveston to Jamaica, to Grand Cayman, to Cozumel, and then back to Galveston. It's a one-week cruise, and we'll be offering two parallel track programs, one for healthcare providers, for primary care providers. They will get continuing education credits, and then a parallel track for families and people with type 1 diabetes, adults and so on, to teach them sugar surfing and advanced diabetes management methods. It'll be on the same ship. They'll be the rooms will be adjacent to each other. And we've done these through the years. I've done several of these through the years, and I've taken about 3 years off to take a break because I was doing them annually for a while. And we'll be resurrecting that next year. So hopefully you can share with your viewers that what we're doing, and anybody who might really be interested in joining us for the cruise or for the retreat at the camp will be welcome to do so. And I'll share those posts with you for the websites where they can get that information.
Absolutely. Do you have a copy of your book you can hold up to show to my viewers or your viewers? There we go. This is Dr. Ponder's book, Sugar Surfing, and you can keep up with Dr. Ponder on StephenPonderMD.com, sugarsurfing.com, or on Facebook at Stephen Ponder MD. Did I get that right? On Facebook?
Oh, it's the Power Within by Stephen W. Ponder, and the other one is Sugar Surfing. Those are the two Facebook pages. Sugar Surfing is one that's specifically on sugar surfing, and the Power Within is more of an empowerment page. The Power Within by Stephen Ponder.
Well, thank you so much. I think you have been so inspirational, and I know how busy you are, and I truly respect and appreciate all of this time. And I look forward to keeping up with you and hopefully coming on that cruise next year.
I do too. That'd be great.
Thanks so much. Have a great weekend, and thanks for your time.
Thank you, Alyssa. Bye-bye.
Bye.